Okay.
All right.
All right. Welcome everybody to our Free Principle Global Community webinar. Today we have the privilege to have Linda Pransky, our guest speaker. Before we start, I'd just like to say a few words about the Free Principle Global Community. That's a non-profit organization, and the mission is basically to spread the word about the free principle worldwide. So to do that, there is podcasts, videos on the website. There is also those webinars, and there will be a first conference in September in St. Paul, Minneapolis. So if you can join, I strongly encourage you to do so. Before I introduce you to Linda, I just want to talk about logistics. At the end of the webinar, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. If you want to ask a question, you can do two things to raise my attention. Either click on, should be a little hand at the bottom of the participant list. You can click on that and I will raise your hand and I'll be able to unmute you. The other thing is to send a chat to me and tell me I want to ask a question, and again, I'll unmute you so you can ask. Now, Linda. Linda Pransky has been involved in teaching the principle for a very long time. And after she met Sid, she started a principle-based practice with her husband, George, working primarily with couples because having met Sid and having learned from him and with him, that changed their relationship in a very, very good way. They eventually moved on to working with businesses because one of the couples they work with could see that the way they were working with relationships was very applicable with working with businesses. And they did that for many, many years. Currently, Linda changed a bit focus, and she is a mentor for the One Thought program, and she also has a round mentoring program in Laconer with George, her husband, and Barbara Patterson. So her focus is about developing practitioners in the free principles. So Linda, I'd like to pass you on the microphone, and up to you. Thank you very much. Linda, we can't hear you. Can you put the microphone on? We can't hear you.
It's not on?
Ah, that's it. That's very good. That's good now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, that's good.
Okay, that's good. All right.
That's good. Thank you.
I was going to talk about understanding. The topic is a little goes a long way. And so I'm going to start out with a story. I like stories. When I first met Sid Banks, and Sid Banks was my teacher. You know, I learned from him. So I'm going to be referring to him because naturally, you know, a lot of my stories of learning relate to him. But I remember when I first started listening to Sid, I asked him the question, because it was very perplexing to me. How come people listen to you? They just listen. And they have insights that help them. They have thoughts that help them. They have new thoughts that helps them, you know, clear their mind, clarify their mind, help them with their life. How does that work? You just listen to somebody and get an insight. You know, like, and I said to him, people listen to me, they don't get insights. So what is it? And he says, well, I talk from my deepest understanding of what I know of the three principles, and it wakes people up. And I said, well, what do you mean it wakes people up? He says, well, it's not like I'm giving something to people that they don't already have. He says, people are the principles. They just don't know it. They've forgotten. They've forgotten that they are thought, consciousness, and mind. And that when I taught from my deepest understanding, what happens is that people wake up to that fact. People remember. And you can remember at different levels of understanding. In other words, There's all different levels of understanding the principles, all different depths of understanding. And he said, I was lucky enough that I just went through it all, and I realized, I went to the deepest possible place and realized the principles. It's just, people don't realize their wisdom, that they have wisdom. And two things stuck with me when he said that. One was, I have wisdom. I didn't know I had wisdom. I never thought about the fact that I had wisdom. I always thought that wisdom came with age, and like when you got old, you got wisdom. I never considered that I might have wisdom now. And that was very intriguing to me and very hopeful. Now, the other thing that stuck with me was, wow, you got the whole thing. You realized the three principles, fully realized them. I want to do that. Have that kind of insight where I realize the whole thing. Now that aside, my desire to realize the whole thing, putting that aside and going back to being intrigued by the thought that I might have wisdom, I went away and I thought about that. And I thought about it for a long time, and I thought about, well, where is it? And what does it mean to experience it? And what does it look like? And I had a lot of ideas about it, but nothing felt right. So I went back to Sid and I said, Sid, it really intrigued me, the whole idea that people have wisdom and they just have to wake up to it. So where is it? Where do you find it? And he laughed and he said, well, it's inside. And I said, inside where? And he said, well, inside. And I said, well, inside my body? He said, no. He said, it's a level of consciousness that you wake up to. Wisdom is a level of consciousness. He says, you know how people have their intellect, which is about what they know and about their thought systems and thought habits and what they think about and what they can analyze. And I said, yeah, I kind of get that. He says, well, underneath that, people have a different thought process, a deeper process, a deeper way of going about thought called wisdom. Now, to me, that was brand new. It was completely new, because when I met Sid, my mind was a big old mess. My mind was filled with negative thought, busyness, confusion, and essentially torment. And given that, I didn't have a lot of clarity. I didn't have a lot of clarity of thought. And I didn't have a lot of reflection. And what I mean by that is that my thoughts came so fast and furious. Can you hear me? Did it just change? Mm-hmm. I lost him there. I lost you for a minute. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. That's good.
Okay. Did you lose me? I lost you.
Yeah, we can hear you well, Linda.
Okay. Well, my thoughts came so fast and furious that I didn't really have any time to reflect. I had no perspective. And so, in talking with Sid, and the way he would kind of draw a picture, that would be a good way of saying it. He would draw a picture of the difference between what it was to experience wisdom and what it was to live in what I might call a runaway mind. Because that's the mind I lived in, a mind that just ran around. And as he drew a picture of that, I started to recognize that there were times that I had wisdom, that I lived in wisdom, and I didn't appreciate it. There were times that I had wise thought, but I didn't listen. There were times that I had really sensible, practical thinking that was very helpful, that I would just run over and not pay attention to. Now, this was unbelievably enlightening to me, the idea that within me was wisdom that I could access, that was independent of my intellect, thought habits, and thought system. And Sid would call it the difference between the hard drive of your computer and your software. He said wisdom was hard-driven into you. It was like God-given, or you were born with it. It came with you. Whereas your thought habits, your habits of thinking, your intellect was something that you learned. It was information. It was ways that things that you would take on, thoughts that you would take on, and thoughts that you could take off. So, as Sid talked about wisdom and the difference between wisdom and the intellect, it wasn't what I had wanted in terms of having the kind of insight that would make me realize the depth of the principles of thought, conscious, and mind, but it was an understanding that was oh so very helpful. Now, I want to fast forward a couple years, actually about 10 years, and tell another story. There was a group of us teachers sitting around, and we were talking about what we had learned, and essentially we were comparing insights, and what we had learned from them and how they'd helped us. And I remember that after a while, and I'm not going to mention names, but one of us said, unlike you people, I haven't had a lot of big insights, but I've had a lot of small understandings that have changed my life. And I'd never thought of it that way. After she said that, I thought, me too. Me too. I've had a lot of small understandings that have helped my life, that have changed me, that I haven't really appreciated because I've been looking for certain kind of insights. I've been looking for insights that I want to look a certain way, or insights that I want to have. But I've had so many small thoughts that have changed the direction of my mind and changed my life. And then I remember that first conversation with Sid about wisdom and how that thought, the idea, the thought that I had wisdom, over time opened up my understanding of what that meant in my experience of what it was and how helpful it was in sorting out myself and finding my own wisdom and seeing the difference between what wisdom was and what my intellect or my analytical thinking was. Now, one of the other things that happened to me when I first met Sid is that when you talk about thought all the time and how it's all thought, well, I had the idea that if it's all thought, then I could get my thinking together, the content of my thinking together, and think the way I wanted to, have the kind of content I wanted. So if I was a very negative thinker, which I was, and I wanted to be a positive thinker, I could just get the positive content of my thinking together and not have negative thinking. So I became all about managing my thinking, organizing my thinking, the content of it, which actually was kind of like a second job. It's very stressful in its own way, trying to get the right content. And sometimes it would work out for me. In other words, I could clear my head of negative thinking and I could think positively and I think, oh, this is good. But other times, there's no way I could clear my head of my negative thinking. I could not get the content right. So after doing this for quite some time, I had a new thought about it. I had an insight. I had a new understanding. Just a small little thought that made all the difference in the world. And a lot of times my insights came as, you know, Linda. So this was a, you know, Linda. You know, Linda, if you wouldn't take your thinking so seriously, it wouldn't really matter what kind of content you had. Now, at the time, I didn't quite understand that, but it felt really good. And insights feel really good. Insights feel really uplifting. And this was a very uplifting thought. So, like I thought about it. I reflected on it. I thought, well, what does that mean if I don't take my thinking seriously? I don't have to manage the content of my thinking. I thought, well, if I don't take my thinking seriously, it just kind of seems like it goes away. Or it seems like it stays, but I can do other things. I don't have to pay attention to it. It's like if when I take it seriously, I really have to pay attention to it. Because I'm taking it seriously. You know, they kind of go hand in glove. So that understanding of that thought, that new thought, that insight, well, you know, Linda, you don't have to take it seriously. Changed the course of my life. In other words, I was able to give up my second job, which was managing the content of my thinking. Now, some people are very lucky in that they have the content of their thinking is very positive. You know, so they don't really feel like they have to change it. Because, you know, you feel your thinking and they feel the positive nature of their thought, and that's good. Where me, my thinking, you know, I was raised with negative thinking, and so I got to feel the content of my thinking, which was very negative. But the thing is, it really didn't matter in the scheme of things to have negative thought if I didn't take it seriously, because it neutralized it. It became neutral within my own mind. It didn't bother me. So it was just a small thought, a small understanding that really changed the course of my mentality. Now, what happened over time is that I kind of got over the fact that I had to have these big insights, you know, the big enchilada, the insight that it's the realization that Sid had. It's like I didn't really have to do that anymore because I just started appreciating new thought, new understanding in little ways. Because I started appreciating that they'd make all the difference, those little thoughts, those new thoughts, those new understandings. And I realized that it was an endless possibility and an adventure. An adventure. For me, it felt like an adventure, like what new thought is going to change the course of my mind, what new understanding that comes from wisdom, not from what I already know, not from my intellect, but from what I don't know. And so much of life I don't know. I'll tell you another one that was really funny and really good. And really, a lot of my insights when I first would have them would be, oh, that's really stupid. You know, I think it was, oh, that's a really, but it wasn't stupid at all. You know, it was like really powerful and really good. Like when I first met Sid, if I get emotionally reactive, like for example, an emotional reaction, for an example, would be like you get your feelings hurt. That's an example of emotional reaction. So when I would have emotional reactions, what would I do? Naturally, I'd analyze them, which would put me into a big mental snarl. And because I would keep doing it, the more the mental snarl I get in, the more I'd analyze. So I'd be in a mental snarl for quite some time. Well, I was listening to I had gone to, this wasn't with Sid, but it was someone else, and they were talking about emotional reactions, and they were saying, you know, people make a big deal about emotional reactions, and they don't have to. And my insight was, what do you mean you don't have to? You mean I don't have to? I thought I had to. I thought I had to make a big deal about an emotional reaction. Where did I get that? Where did I get that thought that I had to make a big deal out of an emotional reaction? That's interesting. I didn't even know I thought that I had to make a big deal about an emotional reaction. Really? And that's why I thought it was so stupid. Not so much my insight, but the thinking I had around it. I thought I had to make a big deal about it. Really? Now, that small insight, I don't have to, if I don't want to, change the course of my life. It gave me much more time outside of emotional reactions. A lot less time thinking about them, because I went, wait a minute, I don't have to think about them. I can have them and not think about them. Really? You can have an emotional reaction and not think about it? Really? You can do that? And I went, yeah, I can really kind of do anything that I understand. If I understand I don't have to do it, I don't have to do it. If I understand I don't have to think into it, I don't have to think into it. If I understand I don't have to make a big deal about it, I don't have to make a big deal about it. All these little new thoughts, all these little insights, all these little understandings, all this new thought makes all the difference in the world. And it happens from listening to what Sid would call truth, which equates to the three principles. He would call the three principles the truth of life, the truth of who we are, the reality of who we are, thought, consciousness, and mind, that creates the content of what we are, the content of our thinking, the personalities of us, the thought systems of us, the thoughts of us our personal reality. And as we gain deeper understanding of the principles, the thought systems of us, the personalities of us, the content of us changes. You know what I was thinking of doing at this? Plug this in over there. Maybe that will help. There she comes. Hi.
Linda, can you try again? Because we lost you. We lost a bit the connection.
Where did you lose me?
Just when you say, I thought I will do that now.
Oh, I was thinking I'd ask first questions to see if anyone had any questions.
So if you want to ask a question, you can either raise your hand by clicking on the little hand icon, or send me a chat and I will unmute you so you can ask your question. Anybody for questions?
Oh, I had a question. Somebody asked me a question.
Okay.
The question is, could you give me an example of when you've had an emotional reaction and let it go? I have so many examples of that I have to, you know, let me choose one. Well, one beautiful one that I love is that very powerful one. And I remember that George and I were driving home from the airport, and we come in from Europe, and we'd been up for a really, really long time, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning. It was 3 o'clock in the morning our time, and we were driving back to McConnell. And we were both so tired, and we were both really, you know, we were grouchy. And and we argue about who started it. You know, we argue about who started it, but one of us said something, and the other one reacted. Like, well, what do you mean? You know, what do you mean by, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but what it was kind of like, what do you mean that you know, don't like my dress? I don't know what it was, but something one of us said hooked the other one, and got that. You know how you get that knot of insecure feeling, or that knot of anger, or that knot of upset. You know, so somebody said something, and I remember having that, getting activated and having that feeling, that knot of, oh man, you shouldn't have said that. That's not right. So we ended up in this big argument, and I don't remember exactly what it was. I just remember what I said, and essentially what I said was, you know, I wish I had never married you. And he said, you know, I feel the same way. And I said, what do you mean? You wish that I had never married you? He said, no, I wish I'd never married you. So we end up in this, you know, and then it gets worse. And so at the point of it being really the worst, all of a sudden, out of the blue, out of my mouth comes, you know, isn't it amazing that we know what we know about thought? Because if we didn't know what we knew about thought, probably tomorrow morning I'd be calling my attorney and starting divorce procedures with you. But you know what? I don't have to, because it's just thought, and I'm in a really bad mood, and you're in a really bad mood, and we don't have to pay attention to it. And George said, he started laughing, and he says, I know, isn't that great? So it's like that was the end of it. It was the end of it. It was the end of the emotional reaction, and we both started laughing. And felt very fondly towards each other that we could have this kind of intense emotional reaction together, not even unilaterally, but together, and stop in the middle of it and laugh about it because it was just thought. And it didn't matter. It only mattered if we made it matter. And we didn't. It didn't matter. It was just, we were in a bad mood, we were really tired, and we got into bad thinking, and that's all that happened, and we didn't have to take it seriously. I love that one. It's one of my favorites. And I'll give you another example, like, you know, somebody will say something and I'll start having a sequence of thinking. Not so much anymore, but when I first met Sid, I'll have a sequence of thinking about, oh, why did they say that? What does that mean? They must not like me, or what's behind it? And what are they trying to do? So I'd have a lot of thinking about something somebody said. And it would keep me in this feeling of, they shouldn't have said that. If they loved me, they wouldn't have said it. Or they liked me, they wouldn't have said it. And it would keep me in that feeling. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, it would occur to me, you know, here's my wisdom. You know, here's my wisdom that Sid was talking about. And again, it comes as kind of, you know, Linda, you could keep thinking about this or not. The more you think about it, the more bad feeling you're going to accumulate. It's not going to help. You know, you could keep going, or you could just stop it and live a nice feeling. This is my wisdom talking to me. It always talked to me that I wouldn't hear because for whatever reason it mattered more that I figured out who was right or wrong. It mattered more if I figured out whatever it was that I wanted to figure out. It mattered more that I don't know, my thought system and what I thought mattered more than living in a nice feeling. So I started, you know, it would stop. I started listening to my wisdom. And as I listened to my wisdom, in the middle of a big ball of hurt feeling or a big ball of analyzing, I just stop it and go into nice feeling. And I love that. I love that I just start listening to my own wisdom. So that's an example of, 2 examples of emotional reactions, 2 different kinds, one interpersonally and one intrapersonally, just having to do with me and not another person. Anybody else have a question or something that they wanted me to talk more about?
Linda, there is a question I can read that I received on chat from Julie. So she asked, what steps do you take today to continue to increase your level of understanding and enable you to access your wisdom more often?
Say that again.
What steps do you take today to continue to increase your level of understanding and enable you to access your wisdom more often?
That's a great question. That's a really good question. I have to think a minute. Well, you know, in a way, I don't really, it doesn't seem to me that I take any steps. Like, I remember when I was first listening to Sid, and I, you know, wanted to, really was desperate to learn more. I mean, because I was really suffering. Psychologically, I was really suffering. And so I was really, really looking for steps to take. And so the steps that I would take is that I would listen to Sid as much as I could. You know, I'd go to Salt Spring Island, or I'd listen to his recordings. And in listening to him, I would have insight. Now, what it looks like to me is it's a natural, occurrence. It's like, it seems to me that people are just, and I'm just wired up to have insight. I'm wired up to have new thought. And so isn't everybody else. It's just, they don't appreciate it. They don't listen to it. Now, I can tell you that what I did that essentially would keep me from hearing it, and that was that I just fill my head up with all kinds of personal thinking, and I think about myself all the time, and I think about my problems all the time, and I think about what was wrong all the time, and I would think about, you know, everything that would drown out my wisdom that was there. And I wouldn't hear it. Now, I had the realization that all of my personal thinking and my constant analysis and my self-absorption, my constantly thinking about myself and what was wrong and how to fix me, and was making it hard to hear it. That was a realization I had. And that realization, that understanding, allowed me to lessen it, to stop it, so it was easier to hear my wisdom. But I don't really feel like I take steps. I just, people have the understanding. Like, I want to go back to what Sid said, is that people aren't broken. See, I thought I was broken. I really did. I wasn't broken. I just had a lot of thinking going on that wasn't helpful, that was filling my head and keeping me from realizing my own wisdom. And as my mind quieted down, as I saw through insight and small understandings how to quiet my mind, as I started to appreciate a quiet mind, as I started to appreciate that I couldn't hear wisdom from the constant chatter in my mind, as I started to appreciate that, and my mind would quiet down, I would have I would realize my own wisdom that was already there. Like Sid said, you're everything. You are the principles. Everyone, they are the principles. They just need to wake up. And that's what I do, he said, is I talk in a way that wakes people up to their own wisdom, to the fact that they are the three principles, and that there's levels and levels of understanding that. So if you were going to take a step, if you wanted to take a step, just listen as best you can to people who teach the principles, three principle practitioner, whoever you think has wisdom, whoever you think raises your spirits. Because when you have wisdom, when you access wisdom within yourself, your spirits go up. That's one thing that wisdom does. It's like, oh, that's a good thought. That's a good answer. Wisdom, the feeling of wisdom raises your spirit. The thought, those wise thoughts raise your spirit. And if you're listening to someone that you think has wisdom, then your feelings go up, your spirits go up. That would be a good person to listen to. Or listen to Sid Banks. He's on DVD or CD. Listen to him. So that would be a step. Listen. Listen and listen. And when you, and people are wired up to hear. They are. They are. They are. They just don't think they are. And the fact that they don't think they are is just a thought. See, the fact that I thought I was broken was just a thought. It was just a thought that I took seriously. The thought that I didn't have wisdom was a misnomer. I had wisdom, I just didn't listen to it. And once I started listening to it, I started remembering that I had it all the time. I just didn't pay attention. And I didn't identify with it. I identified with the thoughts that said things were wrong with me. It's an interesting thought, the power of thought, and how tricky thought is, and how tricky how your thinking can, how you can think about yourself in a way that doesn't serve you, and how you can think in a way that serves you. I hope that answers you. I don't know, but I hope it does. We have another question.
We do. We have Ken McCall. I'd like to ask a question.
Okay.
Can you unmute it if you want to ask the question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
Really enjoy. I'm in Scotland, the same country as Sid Banks came from. And what I'd like to ask a question about is I'm completely new to the three principles idea. I've got Jack Pransky's book. I can't remember the title offhand. It's what they should have told us. Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And I'd like to know if and it's great. And I'd like to know if there's any other books, similar books that explain it in as clear-cut a manner as he does in his book.
Okay, but can I ask you a question first?
Yeah, sure. On you go.
Well, you know, in this webinar that, you know, in this presentation that I did, I tried to orient it to people like you, to beginners. So I'm wondering, did it resonate with you, the presentation? Did it help? Did it, as a beginner, do you feel like it connected with you and made sense?
Yes, very much so.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And with my partner Kathleen as well, she's listening to it as well. Oh. And yeah, it's resonated. In fact, she's sitting taking notes. She's written down basically everything you've said.
Well, you know what my favorite book is with the principal books?
Yeah.
My favorite is The Missing Link by Sydney Banks. It's my all-time favorite.
Do you know something? I'm glad you've said that, because I've actually got that book. I bought that book about 10 years ago, and I'd forgotten I had it. But I've actually got that book. Yeah.
And the thing is, here's a confusion that I had. See, you can't, if you try to explain the principles, it gets people into a lot of thinking. What you want to do is realize them.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now, so if you, remember when I talked about Sid, the first conversation, he said people have wisdom?
Yes.
Well, when he said that, I had I had an insight, a little one. The insight was, is it possible that me, Linda Pransky, has a wisdom? That was my insight. And it opened a door. Because it stuck with me. It got in my craw. It's like that thought wouldn't go away. It's like, is it possible that that was an insight? Is it possible, really, I could have insight? Now, because it was an insight, over time it just expanded. That thought expanded. It, in a way, exploded. And it started filling in with all kinds of other insightful thoughts like, yeah, I do, I just don't pay attention to it. I pay attention to thoughts like I'm broken, or there's something wrong with me, or I need to be fixed, instead of paying attention to the fact that I had insightful thought, that I had wisdom. See, there's a difference between realizing the principles and explaining them. You can think about them in terms of explanation forever. It's not going to help you. Doesn't matter how much you understand them intellectually. And trust me on this, I went for years trying to understand intellectually the principles of thought, consciousness, and mind, and I got it together. Intellectually, I could give a great presentation on the three principles intellectually. But it didn't help me because it didn't come from insight. It came from the intellect. So that's what you're looking for, not an explanation, but you want to, that's why I love The Missing Link, because it's such a deep book. You can't really think about it, but you can reflect on it. Those passages can hit you. And then they stick with you, and in a way, they bother you in a good way. Like, for example, what bothers me in a good way is the duality, the passages on duality. I love it. I don't understand them, but they bother me in a really good way.
Absolutely.
They intrigue me, the duality of life. And people see the duality rather than the oneness. I love that. I can't tell you what it means. I can't explain it, but I resonate with it, and I know that someday it'll fill in for me, and I'll have more insight, just like how that insight about wisdom filled itself in for me. Does that make sense?
Quite a few of the people that talk about the three principles talk about resonance. So it's resonance as opposed to intellectual understanding.
Yeah. That's
So
right.
thanks very much for your answer, and I feel wiser now.
Great.
Thanks very much.
In keeping with my presentation.
Yeah.
Wisdom. Yeah. Okay. Great.
And thanks very much for your answer. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
We have another question, Linda, from Wim. So I'm going to unmute him. Wim, you're unmuted if you want to ask your question to Linda.
Do you hear me?
I can.
Oh, hello, Linda.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing fine, thanks. My question that I have is about when you start to feel your spiritual nature more.
Oh, hey, Wim, is there any way that you can up the volume? You're starting to fade.
Oops. I can do it.
Oh, Corinne, I can't hear him. Maybe he could write it in.
I'll talk a bit louder. If that's
Oh,
okay.
yeah, that's much better. Thanks.
Okay, yeah. So my question is, if we become more aware of our spiritual nature, don't we start to live a bit like in Zombieland, as if nothing really matters? You feel like I find it hard to express it, but today I was talking with my parents about who we really are, and my parents really have this belief of we are this body, I am this body, and I come from a more spiritual perspective, and I feel more that my essence of my essential being is more this presence or consciousness. And when I was talking, or when I was explaining that, I felt a bit like, have I become a zombie or something? Like, yeah.
So do you have a question?
Well, is that something that you recognize? Because if you don't take your thinking serious, then there's also something about nothing really matters. So.
Oh. Well, here's the thing about that. I know that's a confusion in that there's a way in which people, I don't know if this will answer you, but I'm going to take a shot at it. Like, when I saw that not taking my thinking seriously was a good idea for me, you know, from my wisdom, that not taking my thinking seriously really helped me. My reaction to that was an unbelievable sense of freedom. Okay? I mean, it felt amazing for me. Now, I could see if somebody had the thought not to take their thinking seriously and they felt really bad about it, like felt like they were a zombie, or that they, I don't know, were aimless, or it just didn't feel good, then it seems to me that wouldn't be a wise thought for them.
Yeah.
In other words, I mean, I don't think people feel good when they feel like they're a zombie.
Yeah.
Just feels weird.
Okay, sure.
So you may not want to take.
It feels also a bit weird. I don't know.
What?
I feel free a lot of the time,
But
it also feels a bit weird.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to to say about that.
Perhaps it feels weird compared to people who are not into the principles, or not into more spiritual understanding of life. I don't know.
I'm sorry, Wim, you're fading away and I can't hear you.
Perhaps it feels a bit weird because when you're surrounded with people who are not really into a spiritual understanding of life, and you're sort of the exception almost. I mean, like in my with my family or my friends, they're not that much into spirituality. So that's I think in such a way.
Well, you know, here's the thing that helps me with that, okay? You know, and I'm going to go back to the beginning of the presentation when I said that when Sid said, look, we're all thought, consciousness, and mind, we just don't know it. Well, you know, people that say aren't as awake to their own spiritual nature as you are just as spiritual. It's just they're not as awake. Their thought, consciousness, and mind, and they have just as much, I mean, they're the same as you and me. You're just not awake, maybe as awake or as understanding as we are. But when I remember that, which I do, and I love remembering that, it makes me feel close to people no matter what their disguise. It makes me feel close to people no matter whether they think they don't understand or not, because they just think they don't understand. They're just like me. They understand, they just haven't woken up. And that makes me feel like we're all in the same boat, that there's really no difference between anyone except a level of understanding, a level of awakeness.
Yep, makes sense.
And that we all have a disguise of thought that really equates to our personality. You know, our personality is built by thought, and people get really attached to their thinking, and their personalities can get very strong. But underneath their thinking, underneath their personality is wisdom, is who they are, the truth of them, which is thought, consciousness, and mind. Manifest in the understanding at the level that they are right now, and that level can change. Corinne, did you want to say something? No?
There is one more question, Linda.
Oh, okay.
Is that okay? I will read it because the person doesn't have microphone, so I'll read it for you. It's from KDP Ross, and he asked, in an argument, for instance, how do you deal with people who are taking their personal thinking and the argument very seriously and are angry at you precisely because you're not taking it personally, because you're not getting upset about the situation?
And what's happening? So one person is really upset and taking it very seriously, and the other person isn't. And the question is what?
Is how do you deal with people who are taking
how do you deal with people?
Yes. Who are taking their personal thinking and the argument very seriously and are angry at you precisely because you're not taking it personally.
Yeah,
because
well,
you're not getting upset.
How do I deal with people like that? Very carefully. Because, I mean, like I put myself in their situation. When I'm taking something really seriously, well, like, oh,
We lost you again, Linda.
about, well, you know, it's
Linda.
an adult and they won't let me go away. You know, they want me to agree with them, or they want me to. So, I mean, there's all kinds of ways to deal with that situation. In other words, you can get very creative about it.
Linda, we lost you at the middle of your answer, so could you start again, please?
Well, the thing about it is, like, did you hear the part where I put myself in the position of, like, my grandchildren are like that. You know, they get really committed to the way they think and very upset if I don't take them seriously, particularly if I laugh at them, you know, and think they're cute for being upset. They feel patronized, and so basically I kind of get quiet and let them have their thinking, let them have their separate reality, you know, let them work it out. And I don't argue with them. I just let them have however. And if they, you know, and if it's an adult, sometimes an adult, they want you to agree with them. But you know, it's like you just find creative ways of understanding that they're just caught up and you're not, and sometimes you'll be where they are and they'll be where you are, and you just, you know, it's just understanding that sometimes people get caught up and really committed to their thinking, and they want you to join them, and you don't want to, and you just, you know, you get compassionate, or you get, you know, make an excuse. Sometimes I make an excuse. Gee, I have to go. I have an appointment. Sorry, we'll have to pick this. I mean, you just get creative about it. You just let people, but you come from allowing people to have their separate reality, allowing them to have their thinking. I don't know if that answers you. I hope so.
I guess it does answer the question. I didn't hear anything else, so that's okay. That was the last question, Linda. So.
All right. Well, I guess it's time to close and say goodbye. I hope you enjoyed it, if it was helpful.
We did, Linda. And I want to say thank you, and I'm sure all the participants will join me. Big thank you very much. It was a great webinar.
Okay.
Thank you. And before we close, I just want to remind everybody, next month, the webinar is on the 20th of June, and it will be with Mara Gleason.
Okay.
So I hope you'll be able to join us. Thank you very much again, Linda.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye.